You come this side. Oh. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I don't know. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to be presiding over this final session. We've saved the best to last. And it's not only an extremely intelligent, talented panel, it's also the most beautiful one, as you can see. Thank you. I had to nip back to my room to put some lipstick on. This competition is terrible. So it really is wonderful to be with the Emerging Leaders panel, the emerging leaders of the Atlantic dialogues. And they are people who've been listening to the last 2.5 days, all the older generation talking. They've been sitting there diligently taking notes, and now it is their turn to speak and to let you know what they think. And I'm normally not as generous as this with young people because I have 4 children between the ages of 19 and 24, and I normally don't let them say a word. I tell them that I am boss. But in this case, I'm being very, very kind to this young panel. So, you know, there's the word in English, youthquake, which means the ability of young people to really effect change. And this past year, since we last met, we've seen that in all sorts of ways, haven't we? We've seen the young protesters in Hong Kong and how they've really managed to, you know, inject new life into the political debate in Hong Kong and so on, at a cost, of course. We've seen Extinction Rebellion in London. We've seen in Colombia, where one of our panelists comes from, you know, street protests and so on. So young people are always in the vanguard of change, aren't they? They are the ones who lead older people into really grasping chance. And of course, Greta Thunberg, the young Swedish climate activist, has been declared the Time Person of the Year. So in all sorts of ways, young people are really leaders. I mean, emerging or emerged, take your pick. We're going to hear from them, but before we do that, we're going to watch a short video because before this major conference takes place, the emerging leaders have their own get-together here in Morocco where they talk about lots and lots of issues. So we're just going to give you a flavour about those discussions. So roll the film, please. Well, it looks like you had a lot of fun. Did you?
It was awesome.
So the age group is roughly about 25 to 35. Why wasn't I on that? Yeah. Just slightly above that. And you're all in your early 30s, apart from you, Shaima. So I'm going to start off by very quickly asking all of you. The theme of this conference has been the South at a time of turmoil. Shaima, you're from here in Morocco, our host nation, and thank you very much indeed, of course, to everybody who made this wonderful gathering possible. So, is the South in turmoil, and if so, why? Just very quickly give us a rapid-fire answer.
So I'm Shaima Aburjish. I am from Morocco. I'm the National Project Coordinator for the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, and I'm very much a huge youth advocate for inclusion of youth in decision making. Therefore, last year I was able to receive a UN award for mobilizing more than 6,000 Moroccan youth around the SDGs agenda. And I mean, starting with the question, is the South in time of turmoil? If it wasn't, would we even be discussing it right now?
So it is.
But not, yes.
It is.
It definitely is, because most of the discussions that we've been having already are about populism, are about education being in crisis, are about democracy in crisis, are about the climate crisis. So basically a lot of climate crises that can actually showcase that the South is indeed in time of turmoil.
All right. Okay.
So
a bit of a pessimistic start, if I may say.
Sadly,
Okay.
but it is sort of part of the reason why it is in turmoil is because a lot of vulnerable communities have been excluded, including youth, women, refugees, migrants, indigenous people.
All right.
And
we'll come to all that
definitely.
in a moment. So, okay, so very, very much a crisis. Let's go to you, Chido.
Oh, first of all, shout out to my emerging leaders.
And just introduce yourself
We're
to the
50
panel.
of us here, and it's really a pleasure to be one of us here speaking on behalf. My name is Chidioga Kunyili. I'm the founder of She Roars, and we work on supporting women on their self-actualization journey as leaders, as entrepreneurs, and most certainly as powerful agents of change. To your question.
Chidi, yeah?
Yes. As a writer and someone who really believes in the importance of words and stories, I do not like that word, turmoil. And I think while the period we're in could be rephrased as a time of flux, and within this time of flux, there's a lot of challenges, but a lot of opportunities. So my interest is to explore the two and not move into the fear space.
So time in flux
Absolutely.
is a better word for you.
And before the colonization era,
Right.
for example, time of flux, and a lot of moments of massive change and transformation, it's been flux. So how do we perhaps step back from that narrative of turmoil that brings up the emotion of fear and rather lean into perhaps that narrative of change? And then the question becomes, how can we be powerful agents of that change?
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Emmanuel, you're the only chap amongst It makes a change, though, ladies, doesn't it?
For sure.
I think actually at one stage you wanted... At one stage, you all wanted an all-female panel, didn't you?
I guess I made the cut.
You're an interloper. Yes. All right. We'll allow you.
Yes, well...
So, Emmanuel,
Yes, for sure.
is the South in turmoil?
I do believe so. Simply by looking at the fact how a lot of youth have been rising up. And I do believe that the reason why a lot of youth, be it in the South or either in the North, why the youth have been rising up is mainly because a lot of times they feel excluded from the decision-making process, particularly with regards to the policy-making realm.
Right.
I believe, just looking at current developments, there have been so much negotiations going on, be it the EU or the renegotiation of the Cotonou Agreement, for instance.
Right.
And this is an agreement which will affect, obviously, the African youth, the European as well, but then again, where is the youth being included?
So is it more a question for you then that there's turmoil because youth are excluded or because there are factors out there that make the South in turmoil?
I do believe mainly because the youth is being excluded.
Right,
but then
from decision-making
Yes, but then
and so on.
simultaneously, the youth lacks representation.
Okay,
I mean,
but is the South in turmoil?
I do believe so.
Yeah?
I do believe so.
In a
yes.
difficult way, not just in flux?
Yes.
Okay, Liliana from Colombia. We saw a
you.
lot of you in that video.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Edna Liliana Valencia. I'm a proud Afro-Colombian journalist. I'm TV anchor in France 24 in Spanish, and I do the only news show talking about Africa in the Spanish in the whole continent. So I'm very committed with Highlight Africa because I think the lack of identity we have as Afro-descendants in Latin America come from, we don't know where we come from. And to answer the question, I think the answer is inside the bridge we can build between South America and Africa, because we have been so focused on looking at the north. You know, in my country, in Colombia, all the young people is trying to go study in the United States, go live in the United States. But what if you come and study in the Lagos University, for example, or Marroquin University?
Right. That's a solution, an idea you're giving. But is the reason why people want to leave the South, is it because they see no future there as a result of there being problems?
Yeah, but I think it's a perception. Sometimes the perception is even more powerful than the reality.
Right.
So for some reason, people used to think that Africa is not available to grow and to develop, for example, in the economic and new businesses or something, you know. But I think it's just a perception. The perception about Colombia here in Africa is very bad. People used to say to me like, but your country is dangerous, you're in war, drugs and everything, but the perception in Colombia about Africa is the same. So I think we are just blame to each other, and that's the barrier we have.
All right, okay, and Omaira from Niger originally.
Yes. Hello, I'm really happy to be here. I'm Omaira Issa. I am a reporter with Canadian Broadcasting Corporation and Radio-Canada. And I'm actually originally from Niger, but I was born in Morocco, so it's beautiful to be back in my country of birth. Thank you very much, indeed. So I do believe that the South is in turmoil, but there's also a lot of hope. In turmoil because we have a lot of things to figure out. We have questions of inequality. We have questions related to climate change, related to safety and security. But I'm very hopeful because we are the youth. The youth is here. The youth is very, very engaged. And there's a lot of hope. I kept hearing solutions across the hallways. I kept hearing positive talk. And so, yes, I'm very, very hopeful.
So, yeah, so you really are the lone voice of being a pessimist, aren't you? And you should be happy, Shaima, because last week you were awarded the Zaid ibn
Tariq ibn
Zayed Prize, which is an NGO organization based here in Morocco, as the most outstanding young person of the year.
One of the most outstanding young people.
Yeah, that will do.
Yes.
Yeah, congratulations. Yeah,
Thank you.
very good indeed. All right, yes.
Thank you.
So, right, well, let's pick up just one topic, first of all, which is something that a lot of people associate with younger people, which is climate, because you're going to be around for longer than the older generation and you're going to bear the brunt of that. But does any one of you feel that the current climate debate is one that doesn't really include the priorities of the South? So by that I mean, for example, there's a lot of energy poverty in the South.
Yeah, no.
Please,
no,
Liana.
I think even in that kind of spaces, we need to make deeper reflections about it. I have seen, with all respect, I will say this, but I have seen thousands of bottles of plastics here around, you know, and we are supposed to be leaders in our countries, in emerging leaders or leaders. So my question is, what are we planning to do with all these bottles of plastic? Because it's a big problem in my country. We have a lot of rivers, we have 2 oceans, and all the rivers are full of plastics. Also, we have, for example, minery that is creating very, very big damages to the environment. So I think we need to understand that Occidental idea of development is not the only one. Development or innovation is not only have a road or have an iPad in your hands. Development for me is how you can create new opportunities with the things you have in your environment, from who you are, from understanding who you are, where you come from. For example, in my case, I come from Africa and from Colombia, you know. So I need to understand that to create new ideas and to develop new opportunity, new innovation. It's not only technology. Innovation is how we can keep our youth and our people growing in the same territory and in equilibrium with the territory and the nature.
Chidi?
Thank you.
You want to comment? Yeah?
Sure, I'll just speak to something that struck me during the energy session that we had, and there was that debate between, well, Africa has to develop, and we need to be as dirty as we can be because the rest of the world got to do that. And on the other hand, I think Auntie Obi pushed back and said, well, we must not ignore that the effects of climate change, I hope I'm not quoting you wrong, are real for us, and that we can't just look at black and white. It's really complex. And I think I agreed with the conclusion of that session, which is that there is a hope of leapfrogging. And that's something, of course, we saw with mobile technology, and we moved away from landlines, and because you specifically mentioned energy. So
energy poverty, yeah,
energy
I was
poverty,
saying. It's only because I was at the UN General Assembly in September talking to some Africans, and at a dinner, and I said it was off the thing, and I said, what would you like to talk about? The main theme this year is climate change. And some of these very well-established African businessmen said to me, oh, Africans are not interested in climate change in the way that the West frames it, is what they were saying.
And that came up here in discussion as well.
Yeah. But I mean, please do.
I actually think that climate change is huge. I am from the Sahel, I'm from Niger. And with climate change, we have seen an erosion of our lands. And we know right now that in the global world that we live in, we have millions of people who are refugees because of climate change. We talked about it during this incredible conference. Climate change is a huge issue, and I think young people are thinking about it in the global south because they realize that they are the safeguards of the future. And so whether we are here, or we are in Colombia, or we are in Nigeria, or we are in Congo, or we are here in Morocco, we're able to see incredible work that the Moroccan people are doing in terms of solar energy. I think the youth are very, very engaged.
But what do you say to Chidi's point when she said, you know, during the energy debate, there was discussion about we want to industrialize. You speak to any African leader now when they've got their blueprint for how to industrialize their economy. And by that, I don't just mean, you know, factories and manufacturing, but modernizing the entire economy, the service sector, infrastructure, and so on. And they say, as things stand, we cannot rely on renewable energy just to do that. So, okay, we'll keep the coal in the hole, but can we use gas? And there are a lot of people who say, yes, use gas and even oil. I mean, Nigeria, there's a $12 billion oil refinery that's being developed by the Dangote Group. Should they stop that? Is that what the youth want?
Okay, can I?
Yes.
I want to address the fact that whenever we discuss climate change, it's usually discussed within big conferences full of agendas, just like the one we had this week. And afterwards, everyone goes back home, and there's no actual action afterwards. And I feel like that's one of the biggest problems. It's that especially developing countries, including those in the south, don't really have an example or a model of countries to look up to. Now, Morocco is trying to take the leads in terms of renewable energies, but we have countries like the US that are withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. So what kind of example are we even setting for developing countries to step up their game also and encourage renewable energies in their own context? And that is the big problem. And I feel like youth, we actually have a responsibility to own up in that sense. And you can actually notice that. You mentioned Greta Thunberg in the beginning. And she has been one of the biggest climate advocates, but there are a lot of us. There isn't just Greta. There are so many in every country.
Do you have the same concerns, young people, as Greta Thunberg does in Sweden when she says, don't fly? What's the figure? 1% of Africans have actually ever been on an aeroplane. Is that kind of debate relevant to young people in the South? Africans or whatever?
I mean,
yeah.
Sorry, no, I think it's very important, at least in Latin America. I come from Latin America, as you know, and we are reflecting from capitalism, from consumism, to climate change. For example, we are promoting in my country that young women start to use the menstrual cup just to change. But to use that, you need to change a lot of stereotypes in your mind. I don't know if maybe here you have ever reflects about that, but it's an issue. We can just take a personal decision to affect our environment too. So I think youth is very committed with, for example, vegetarianism, stop eating meat, take care of water, that personal actions you can
But
face.
how far do you take it? Do you want Nigerians to go and protest against the building of this new oil refinery?
Yeah, why
for
not? Social
example,
mobilization
because
is
you
very
say
important to
fossil
me.
fuels are dirty.
Well, we expect us to speak up. While it might not be to protest the building of the refinery, but truly to to influence the discussion around the pollution that happens. Because ultimately you see a whole part of the country that has suffered and livelihood and futures decimated because there is no thought around sustainability and protection of the environment. So in as much as Greta's fight is very relevant globally and we take that on, our battle is basic, is how don't you have clean water because it's polluted by oil. So it's on that level that we must move beyond that comfort zone of, well, we get to have our energy and realize that we are thinking very short term. And in terms of the bigger picture, for example, the productivity of the land that we're destroying, well, that we're not being very long term, and it's the youth that would suffer from the short termism.
All right.
So that's why we have a responsibility to challenge that.
Something. I just wanted to add the fact that, especially in the South, for example, in Africa, there are we can actually include youth in order to have more innovative solutions. Because the problem, for example, in Morocco, at the time of the COP, there were a lot of solutions about stop using plastic, etc. But it was, first, like, they decided next day we're going to stop using plastic. And that was a big problem. The solutions have to come from the people and include the people in consultations in order for us to come up with solutions that can be implemented on a grassroots level. Well, if you come up with very neat, high-level solutions, it's not going to go very far. And I feel that that's the problem with the talk on renewable energies and climate change.
All right.
We always come up with solutions that are very high.
We'll wrap up on climate change, but Emmanuel, we've not heard from you. Let me just try this with you. You know, we know Africans are interested, young people particularly, about, and in Colombia and, you know, the global south, about climate change, global warming. We know that, you know, as you said, the climate refugees, and that if global temperatures go up by 1.52%, Ghana's cocoa industry is going to be decimated and so on. But where is your African Greta Thunberg, who is standing up saying climate justice, Africans only account for, 3 to 5% of global carbon emissions, and China, European Union, United States represent the bulk of global carbon emissions. We want a fund that you will put lots of money in to help the global south when it comes to tackling this.
Well, obviously, I'm not an expert on climate change. And
I know, but I'm just wondering, your conversations with young people, you know.
Yes, I mean, it's definitely not my forte, but then again, knowing the policy process happens oftentimes to be reactionary, particularly in nations where there's actually a constituency that votes, right? So there are certain subjects that have been picked up within political agendas that kind of address the short term as opposed to long term. So yeah, people may criticize Dangote for building or seeking to build a refinery in Nigeria, but then at the same time, everybody knows also the African continent needs jobs. So
and needs energy.
Exactly, true. That's true. But I guess government or policymakers and the private sector both kind of have to strike a balance between what the country or the continent particularly needs on the ground, and at the same time being also considerate of the environment.
All right. So. In conclusion, on this particular thing, climate change, do you feel that the voice of youth in the global south is listened to?
I don't think so. I was at the climate change session, and there was no woman on the panel. While we know that women are very, very affected by climate change, there was no young person on the panel. I was stunned to see that. While we are in the room, while there are powerful women as well who could speak on this topic from the global south, there was no such voice. And so as we move forward, wanting to actually have solutions to grave situations, like you said, Africa, for instance, does not contribute a lot to climate change. Yet, we are not here. We are feeling the effects of that. So we do need to do better in terms of young people being heard and women being heard, period.
Do you all agree with that about the climate change and the younger voice in the global south is not heard?
There's also
go on.
two sides of that. We must also engage, right? And I am absolutely with you. I'm not sure I would say that young
is an international thing, that basically the blacker you are in the global south, the harder it is.
Yeah, for sure. I think, of course, this is not an issue only in Latin America. It's not an issue only in my country. It's an issue here in Africa also. But I'm just trying to highlight something that looks to be superficial to tell you that there's a lot of stereotypes we are facing. If we're just trying to have the hair we have in our heads, we're just trying to be black women with dark skin, curly hair.
I think it's a surprise to a lot of people that there are about 12 million people of African descent living in Colombia, and of course we know about the so-called Afro-Brazilians who, you know, left West Africa during the transatlantic slave trade, and but I mean in Latin America as a whole, there are huge diaspora communities,
Yes.
Cuba obviously and so on. So it's very good that you are raising the profile. But just let me ask you, how far do members of the community, people of African descent in Colombia, how much connection do they have with the African part of the Global South?
We have a huge connection. We are Africans essentially, but we don't know we are. That's the fact. For example, I was showing a couple people yesterday here, I was showing them that we have a balaphone, African balaphone. We have exactly the same instrument.
Yeah.
The name is marimba de chonta, and it's the most important instrument in my whole country, in the Pacific Gulf for the black community. It's patrimony of the humanity, actually, by the UNESCO, but they don't know this is a balaphone.
All right.
They don't know
don't
this
know.
come from Senegal
Right.
and from
So
Ivory
that's
Coast.
another area where you think there's lots of room for improvement.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody else want to pick up on this thing of females, women, girls?
If I may pick up, if we
Sure,
were
yeah.
to speak on the topic of identity and perhaps that identity challenge, I think it really is important from, it's almost like know thyself, right? And in our continent, I think because of the many years of external influence, there's been a crisis of identity. And within that, there is also now a movement that is really reclaiming what it is to be African, rejecting the narratives that put us in different boxes that don't serve, be it the boxes of HIV/AIDS you mentioned earlier, and diseases and poverty. And we might all have heard by now of Chimamanda, and she talks about the danger of a single story, and those single stories that define a whole continent that is so diverse. So how are we challenging that and reclaiming that we, as Africans, as women, as young people, we have so much more to offer than any little box that you want to put us in. And that's a journey that is very personal. And in reclaiming that power and the narrative and what you have to offer, then you can really step into how the roles you can occupy in society.
And young people are alive. You're having these discussions. I mean, there's a lot going on identity politics all over the world at the moment. The United Kingdom, where I live, has basically just had an election that's based on identity politics. You know, a lot of people saying that the Conservative Party essentially won this election as the English National Party, and it's caused a lot of issues in Scotland and Northern Ireland, which voted very differently, and people are now saying this has paved the way for Scottish independence and the integration of Northern Ireland with the Republic. So identity politics, that's another thing that's important. Do you see it very differently from your generation, from the older generation?
I think when it comes to identity, one of the most important issues has to do with inclusion and making sure that people are at the table. Right now, I'm based in Canada, and I've learned a lot in Canada. Canada is a country that prides itself on its multiculturalism. Also, we have a lot of Indigenous people who are involved. So really, when it comes to identity politics, inclusion is a big, big deal. We have to be at the table. We have to be at different tables. And when it comes also from, when we're talking about identity, it's for sure personal identity, but also collective identity. What are the narratives that we are saying about ourselves? For me, as a journalist, narrative is very, very important to me. It is, in fact, at the center of what I do, because I know that it's through stories that we connect with humanity. And so that's why identity is foundational. And it's incredible. Here we are. I'm seeing all the diversity and all the different countries in the room.
Yeah.
I've met so many different people, have learned so many different words across, through the few days.
Right, thank you.
just want to
I'll
add-
let Emmanuel, because Emmanuel's...
Okay.
You're intimidated by all these women.
Please, Emmanuel.
All these women on the panel.
I'm
You've
just
been...
waiting for my time to
No,
speak.
no,
you know.
you've got to chip in, otherwise you lose it. But Emmanuel was born in Germany, but his family are from the Democratic Republic of the Congo and has worked in management consultancy for a long time. They're all very talented, this panel. I mean, this young lady here speaks like 7 languages. Her native Igbo, English, French. She studied at Sciences Po. She worked in China in management consultancy, speaks Mandarin, Italian, Spanish,
German.
You know, we had that session on the United Nations. She's like a walking United Nations herself, you know, with all these...
and I'm a young person and I'm African.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, and he's very talented.
But maybe
too.
I can also just jump in because
please, about inclusion, because I mean,
Yes,
one of the
it's about
things is that you see it as the youth are excluded from that top table.
So, well, although I was born and raised in Germany, but I was fortunate to relocate to the US, where I spent 8 years. I studied in the US and then also worked in the US. And the first job that I actually had in the US was in the US Congress. So I was a Congressional Black Caucus emerging leader.
You found an Emmanuel,
What's
like
that?
you.
Yeah,
You found an Emmanuel
exactly,
to work
yeah,
with. Emmanuel Cleaver at the,
Yes.
in the Black American Caucus.
Yes, I worked for a Black American congressman.
Yeah.
But what this program actually enabled me was to live in DC, which is quite expensive if you don't happen to have the means, right? So this program was pretty much constructed to help people of color actually experience positions of power and leadership. And I believe that fostering inclusion can really occur when more programs like this exists.
Really,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So you need programs. But what about effecting change through protests on the streets?
I mean, I'm of the opinion that protest is good.
You look far too... I can't see you out there with your
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean,
Molotov cocktails.
I'll probably get arrested immediately, but hey. I do believe that protest is really good, and I'm actually fortunate to have grown up in a country where people are allowed to protest. But then there has to be some structure after the protests. So I do believe, therefore I'm so passionate about actually providing the youth a stake in the policy-making realm, because I myself have worked in the realm of lobbyism.
But like in what way? What, sort of like have a youth quota in the cabinet or what? What would the mechanism be? You've worked as a civil servant, essentially.
Yes.
You worked in the German Department for International Development.
Yes.
You've worked, as you said, in the US Congress, and then you moved to the private sector.
Yes.
You saw sense and abandoned the public sector. So, what's the mechanism when you say include the youth at the top table? What would it be? Youth quotas?
For one, yes, but I do believe the youth needs to lobby. You know, I know lobby has really received a bad connotation, and a lot of people kind of associate lobbyism with corporate greed.
Right.
But then at the same time, that's just part of political participation.
So do you think there should be specific lobby groups
Definitely.
that are youth
Representing
lobby
youth, yes.
That represent youth?
Yes.
Right.
I do
But
believe
not
so.
just attach yourself to a major lobby group and then just have young people involved. Yeah.
If I can pick
Shaima,
up on
yeah.
that, I mean, we've been discussing a lot, having women in panels, having youth in panels, youth inclusion, etc. And there is something that I don't exactly agree with, which is that usually within a panel, within a conference, or within whatsoever atmosphere, we bring youth and women as a quota. And that's not enough. If you bring them and they're there, it doesn't mean that they're actually included. And that's one thing that we can actually do to include them more, which means that if you actually harness youth ideas and women's ideas, make sure they actually exist on the final strategies that you're going to implement afterwards.
Yes.
Make sure that youth voices are actually heard and that you have youth advisory groups. I mean, we've been discussing populism, democracy, education, and not once youth were mentioned. Not once the youth power and youth creativity and their ability to actually bring in solutions was mentioned. And I was pretty shocked by that, to be very honest. We were talking about youth not being adapted to the market or to the employability market, but not once have we discussed entrepreneurship and people's youth's ability to create actually development and to have an identity that is young and ambitious and creative. And I feel like that is a big problem. We keep on saying youth and overlooking youth as not an actual stakeholder, which they should be from now on.
Right.
So that is definitely something very important and something to keep in mind, because we keep on inheriting problems that seniors create, just like climate change.
So youth ideas, policies and so on have got to sort of right across the board.
Definitely.
In decision-making bodies be incorporated. Because it's often not enough, very quickly, I come to you, Liliana, it's often not enough to have a youthful leader, is it? I mean, in your native Colombia, okay, President Ivan Duque, sorry, excuse me, I don't speak Spanish like you, early 40s, but I mean, and he's only been in power since last year, but you've seen protests on the streets. Being young doesn't necessarily make you responsive to the needs of the young, does it?
Actually,
he doesn't. Oh, he's from a centre-right coalition, yeah.
So actually, being a woman not necessarily make you being a feminist. So you can be a young person not
Yeah.
working for the young people.
Yeah.
You know, I need to be, agent of change to my community, because I can be African and not working from Africa. I can be, So I think in the case of my country in this moment, we have the biggest strike we have ever had in Colombia. We are not a community allowed to protest a lot. That's very bad. And maybe we will not achieve nothing from the government because they are not listening to us, and I include myself.
Right. Did you go on the protests?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So they started. They started in November and they've dwindled a bit, but they're still
November
ongoing.
21.
But they've been mostly just in Bogota. Is
Yeah,
that right?
no, in
They've
different
extended a bit more.
cities, like more than 14 cities in the country. It has been like almost 1 month protesting. I think the government is not paying attention.
Right.
But what I want to highlight is that protesting is also an exercise of conscience that our community is making. Not only the result can be the things that government can give us, but I'm very happy to have the action.
Do you want to say anything
I just
on
wanted
this,
to.
Amira? Yep.
Sure, thank
on
you.
the crisis in democracy, you all agree, or in government?
In governance
Exclusion,
especially.
yeah? Okay, go ahead.
Just on the question of youth, since we are a youth panel, or young people, emerging leaders, youth is such an abstract word, right? It's almost like innovation or development or reconciliation. It's vast. It can mean so many different things. Within the young population, I would like to add that also that there is a lot of diversity around gender, around race, around sexual orientation, and all those things are important. And that's why we need diverse youth experiences and opinions and also narratives at the table.
Absolutely.
Right, good.
And
Oh,
if
yeah,
I
yeah,
may
Judy?
add, it's not a theory, should youth go out, or we are doing this, and the change has been seen, be it from my home country, Nigeria, because you mentioned democracy specifically, where youth were able to pass a bill not too young to run, challenging the age for young people to run for government, be it with Ballet Citoyen that we saw from Burkina Faso, Ileana Ma and Ballet Citoyen from Burkina Faso and Senegal, be it, these are real examples of change and young people saying enough is enough.
Can I ask you very quickly, do young people have the courage to take on vested interests, very deeply entrenched vested interests in the country in which they live,
and
even though it may be at the expense of their own progress? I don't know if many of you know, but Chidi's mother, late mother, was a wonderful woman, a real heroine, a real hero of Africa and the whole of the global south, because she made a very, very principled stand when she was brought in by President Obasanjo at the time, wasn't it, to clean up public life in Nigeria. And she mounted a very effective campaign against corrupted drugs, in the pharmaceutical industry, where people are literally giving antibiotics to an extremely sick infant, only to find there's, talcum powder in the tablet or whatever, and it's basically doing nothing. Death threats, was it bullets skimmed the top of her head and so on? I mean, sadly, she died of natural causes a few years ago, but really, that kind of courageous stand is few and far between, but your mother did it, obviously, as an adult. But can young people, do you think, really make such a brave stand in the exemplary way that your mother did?
Thank you so much. And I suppose what I'm saying is we already are. And we must and we need to be empowered to do even more. And of course, role modeling is critical. You mentioned the example of my mother, and she has inspired so many young people to know that the norm does not have to be that we've inherited for so long. There are other ways to be a servant to the people. You can challenge the way it's always been, right? You can really challenge that terminology. So it's a case of we are already doing it. We need your support. That's why we're sitting on this stage saying we are ready. We need for you to trust that we are ready. We need for you to support us, because that's how it works. Championship is real, and our role models are real, and we need for them to continue to move beyond the status quo of a low bar of leadership, to really encourage us to step into the the future that we want to claim as ours.
Well, I'm sure, I know your mother has 6 children, including you, but she'll be very proud of what you're doing, Chidi, who's worked, as I said, all over the world, Geneva, at the World Economic Forum, you name it, she's done it. We've got about 12 minutes left. I'd like to, at the very end, just go for a minute to the panel at the end. But I'd just like some comments from the floor. I'm going to go to Obi Ezekwesili here from Nigeria. As many of you know, she made a stab at standing in the Nigerian presidential elections, but has done many things. Another great woman in Africa. Is there another microphone? Could you bring the microphone and give it to this lady, and really just rapid fire from the hands here? Probably not enough time for questions, comments. Obi, yeah, thank you for standing.
So first, I want to really do a shout out to them. You know, I get very emotional when I see the younger ones on our continent without the albatross of colonialism, militarization, or the sense that Africa must be about bad governance. All of that is not something that you're carrying as an albatross. And so it has freed you to be able to have this freedom of thought that means you can shape and design what today and tomorrow can be like. So, bravo.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you.
And then I
yes,
just want to
yes,
plug,
yes.
I want to say that this structure that we have, where people frequently end up with saying that our problem is leadership, they're not really saying that we don't have leadership. It is that we don't have leadership in the appropriate place. And the key appropriate place that we need leadership for scale, all of the little things that people are doing are great. But as I said the other day, small is no longer beautiful. And so we need scale. And if you need scale, the most important entity is government. And therefore, it means that political leadership frequently is the issue we're dealing with. And what I am hoping that we will do is that we have our leadership production system for our political process, but in a way that enables the young to build a new ecosystem of political class that has a mindset toward character, competence, and capacity. I want to see a percentage of Africa's youth vote for being politicians, a new class of politicians.
Thank you.
Away with the old.
Thank you, Obi. So just hand the microphone to this gentleman. Very short. Grand Lady of Africa, I gave her more time. Sorry. Very briefly, a brief comment. Introduce yourself quickly and your organization if relevant. Thank you.
I'm Jihad Nimusa. I'm one of the emerging leaders this year, and I'm a psychologist, and I have a mental health social enterprise. So my comment, we've been talking a lot about including youth. And I think there is a disparity between why young people are actually not on the table. Because although we do have a lot of energy and acceleration and innovative ideas, one of the things that we do lack is the wisdom of experience. And we need to acknowledge that in order to start looking at how can we prepare young people in order to be effective in creating solutions that scale, in order to be in leadership, in order to be around these tables.
It picks up from what Obi said,
Absolutely.
creating a new class. Thank you very much.
The risk of not doing that, my last element, is that by learning in the natural way, we keep taking steps towards the status quo, and by the time we are adults, we are exactly the same.
Got it. Thank you. Very briefly, please. Thank you. Thank you.
Marcus, I just wanted to say one thing. Yesterday, I decided to leave this ivory tower and go to the souk.
Yeah.
And I saw that the situation is not so good. It could be any place in the world.
Right.
And Confucius says that the best time for you to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The best time is now. What tree would you plant today so that people who are out there, not living in this
Okay, we'll take that
tower,
as our last question then.
there.
What tree would you plant today is your closing thought. Hand the
Thank you.
microphone to the young lady behind you, and microphone here and there, and then that's it. Briefly. Oh, yes, you want it, yeah. Briefly, yeah. Afterwards.
My name is Chiara Cocchiara. I'm from Italy. And my comment is on the fact that it is true that we have to do so much more for women and the youth. and reaching leadership positions. But I also want to say that we have done already a lot. And the proof is that we have the new Prime Minister of Finland. She's a woman and she's
33, the youngest Prime Minister
so,
ever.
I want to say it is really good
It's happening.
to do.
Great, thank you, good. Yes, young man, introduce yourself and your organisation if relevant, and we'll come to you last. Go on.
Hello, my name is Leonardo Parraga from Colombia. I'm one of the emerging leaders from the past, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm an emerged leader now.
And your point?
My point, well, I think the new generations need a lot of inspirations and role models to look up to. And hearing you all, I think I'm very hopeful of how the South is going to look like in a couple of years, because
nice.
I feel in your words, in your power, in what you represent and what you want to bring to the world.
Thank you.
A lot of hope.
Lovely sentiment. There was another hand up there, yes? And then we give the microphone to this gentleman here. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sarah Morsapali. I'm going to keep this super quick. You mentioned that we don't have a Greta Thunberg of the South. I want to point out that we have a ton of activists. We have Ridhima Pandey, we have Kaluki Paul from Rwanda,
Yes.
we have Ridhima Pandey from India.
Yes.
My point that I'm trying to make is we are out there. We do have a ton of young activists from all over the world who are doing incredible things. What I want to let everyone here know is that please talk to us. Start asking us questions, because I guarantee you that we have answers, we have ideas. That's how we create engagement, is by talking to each other, by discussing issues. Today at the gala, come to us, give us advice, give us mentorship, give us that platform to actually
Very
make
nice.
a difference. Because
Thank
that's
you.
how we
It's
make
there.
change.
You want the visibility and the access. Thank you. And very briefly.
Merci, madame. Je m'appelle Hassan Saoudi. Je suis grand-père.
Yeah.
Et les gens de ma génération ont assisté à des débats contradictoires. Quelle planète allons-nous laisser à nos enfants?
Yeah.
Et quels enfants allons-nous laisser à notre planète? Vous avez donné la réponse cinglante que vous et la planète, vous faites un. Et bravo pour ce leadership. Mais je vous dis une chose, vous ne pouvez pas être leader tout seul, sans tirer les autres vers le haut. Et c'est ce qu'on vous demande. Tirez votre génération et celle d'après vers le haut sur la protection de l'environnement. Vous êtes formidables.
Thank you so much. Very kind. For those, you all understand French? You all understand French? You don't?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you all do. Thank you. That was very nice sentiment. So, in the last few minutes, panel, let's just go very quickly. What would be the tree that you would plant for the next 20 years? A minute each, starting with you, Liliana, very quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to agree with Sarala. We have a leader, the name is Francia Marquez. She's the Nobel Prize of Environmental Care in my country. She's a black woman from the Pacific Coast.
Okay.
So we have a lot of leaders like that. You just need to look at us. Oh, I'm just here to tell you, all leaders around the world, there's up 200 million black people in Latin America, and we need to achieve our roots here in Africa. Please look at us. We can start new businesses. We can start new alliances. We need to reveal our identity. So I think we need to stop looking only to the north, and we need to start looking like south-south to
Building
create.
those bridges within the south.
Yes, and
Fantastic.
visibility is very important.
Thank
That's
you.
my point. Thank you.
Myra, thank you.
Building the bridges is absolutely essential. For me, as an individual who was born in Morocco, raised in Niger, and now I live in Canada, and I have one foot in North America, one foot here, it's absolutely incredible to see that the conversations are happening already. So building bridges, continuing to do that, but also understanding that within the larger conversations, we also need to make sure that the narratives that we are telling about ourselves and telling others are hopeful, because there is a lot of hope. And I agree with everything that was said from the emerging leaders in the room about hope.
Thank you. Shaima?
I would like, first off, to thank the Policy Center for the New South for giving us even this opportunity to sit here and talk to you about youth. That is quite an important topic,
Yes,
indeed.
thank you.
And again, shout out to all of the emerging leaders that actually nominated us to be even sitting here and talking on behalf of them. But we're not only talking on behalf of them, but on behalf of a lot of youth around the world and a lot of youth around the South. And I also want to do a quick shout out to Lilia, who really made this program happen.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Emmanuel?
But
yes, very quickly.
Just one last thing. I mean, I feel like the discussion was quite different than our perspective. We're not asking you to include us. We're telling you that you are doing yourself a favor by including us. We're quite creative, we're very ambitious, and we're gonna come at you whether you want to include us or not. So might as well.
Emmanuel?
Well, I mean, obviously, one thing I'm super passionate about is the policy-making realm. And one knowledge that I would like to share with the next generation is how to actually believe in something, having a vision, but then address that vision with policymakers. So creating access and ways how to engage policymakers and share some of those things that we would like to see changed.
Good.
Yes.
And Chidi, final word.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Sarala, for bringing that up. I remember being, it's not that we don't have a Greta, that was a point that stood out with me. So thank you for pointing out that we definitely do have people doing great work around the environment, perhaps
But they
just
need
not
greater
enough.
visibility,
Exactly.
don't they? Yes.
And thank you to Antioquia Ezekwesili for really being one of those role models I mentioned, and also all the other people in this room that have spoken to us all throughout the week, really supporting us. Please encourage you, as was brought up by my colleague, to keep talking to us. We need your support, and we are here to stay, and we have so much to offer, and this is really a beautiful thing. And to my fellow youth, to really, truly believe that you have everything that you need to serve in this global new world order that we are designing. And the imposter syndrome comes up a lot in the work that I do, that we might really move beyond it because of all the years of narratives of the role of youth. You're young, what do you know? Time is gone to play small, and we must really step into what it is that we can do. And within that, I really love the point of the gentleman on the power of working together. We have that African proverb that if you don't know, I'll share with you in this moment. If you want to go fast, you go alone. And if you want to go far, you go together. And there's a power that I've seen in working with young people, in this case specifically the Global Shapers community. When we work together, magic happens. So let's put our hands together, young, older, and move forward.
So, yeah. I mean, perhaps not planting trees, more building bridges is the kind of idea we got. They often say that youth is wasted on the young. I don't think it has been wasted on these people. The global south in turmoil, there was so much we could have talked about, the unemployment crisis for young people and so on, and all the challenges ahead. But I think that the global south, I mean, it's young compared to the global north. You know, Uganda with a population average age of 15. One's got to believe in the global south when it's got young people like this. Thank you to my wonderful, beautiful, intelligent, talented panel. Thank you to you. It's been my pleasure. It's been my pleasure doing this panel. And please do take your seats, and please welcome a group photo.